In the heart of what is now Nigeria's Delta State, a forgotten storm brewed at the dawn of the 20th century. For decades, one name terrified the British colonial regime, Ekumeku. This wasn't just a rebellion, it was a ghost war, led by a secretive society. We're diving deep into two fierce battles of this movement, the bloody Owa-Anglo War of 1906 and the tenacious Ukwuani Uprisings. To understand the Ika Uprising, specifically the crisis in Owa, we must look back centuries. The Ika people, whose lands served as a crucial buffer zone, had successfully held the mighty Benin Empire at bay from the 15th to the 19th century. When Benin finally fell to the British in 1897, the Ika communities including Agbor, Owa, Ukwuani, and Udakpu thought they had won their freedom. They were tragically mistaken. The new rulers, the British Empire, quickly replaced the threat of Benin with a greater tyranny. In a disastrous move, the colonial government appointed former Benin representatives to positions of authority over the Ika people. These appointees, bearing centuries of historical resentment for the Ikas, used their power to administer merciless punishment. Combined with the colonial government's own policies of compulsory labor and the indiscriminate flogging of respected Ika chiefs, the stage was set for an explosion. The Igbo nature, one that despises oppression, was bound to ignite. The breaking point arrived in June 1906. The colonial high-handedness was exemplified by officers like S.O. Crewe-Read, Captain Majorson, Pike, Chief Ibaham, a Benin appointee, just to name a few. These officers oversaw the burning of large sections of Owa and the public humiliation of Ika leaders for minor allegations of insubordination. On June 8, 1906, Assistant District Commissioner S.O. Crewe-Read planned to visit Owa, and so he sent news to the Obi of Owa demanding provisions, eggs, yams, water and fowls, and crucially 200 men for forced labor on the river to be provided before he arrived at Owa. The Obi of Owa sent his town crier, but the community's response was silent defiance. The villagers instead vanished into the bush. Crewe-Read arrived at a deserted Owa. The Obi of Owa went out to meet Crewe-Read with eggs, yams and water, explaining that his people had ignored his instructions and disappeared into the bush. Crewe-Read instructed the Obi to go into the bush and bring his people out. When the Obi returned, he went to meet Crewe-Read, explaining that a local leader named Ekumeku was preventing the people from coming out. Crewe-Read sent a Bini messenger, Iwagwi, and some officers to Ekumu's compound. It was here at 8 p.m. that the first shots were fired from the surrounding bush. Sergeant Lawani was severely wounded. The Ika resistance had begun. Crewe-Read, disadvantaged and desperate, tried to send telegrams to Agbor for the provincial officer and Asaba for the troop commanding officer, but the Ika resistors intercepted and turned back the messengers. By 3 a.m. on June 9, he attempted a retreat to Agbor. But the Ika warriors were ready. In a swift, calculated ambush they met the colonial force head-on. Crewe-Read, who was on a bicycle, was shot twice and killed. The news of the murder of Crewe-Read by the Ika warriors reached the Obi of Agbor, and he sent some of his royal guards to retrieve Crewe-Read's body, but they were sent back by the Ika warriors. The Ikas were so angered by this that they sent a chilling warning to the Obi of Agbor, threatening invasion if they assisted the British, arguing the Agbor people were responsible for allowing the white men into Ika territory in the first place. The Obi of Owa even sent a military presence to Agbor, declaring the country off-limits to all Bini and white traders. Only Lagos traders were welcome. News of Crewe-Read's death reached Asaba the same day, prompting a swift and brutal military response. Captain Rutkin was dispatched with 3 officers, a medical officer, a political officer, and 194 troops. They met the Ika warriors near Ukwuani in intense fighting where, initially the Ika forces held the upper hand, inflicting large casualties. By 6:30 p.m., the British force was able to fight its way to a river 3 miles from Agbor. It was from here that the British had to request reinforcements of 3 army officers and 111 troops from Aka and heavy arms from Calabar. The fighting raged until July 2nd. After additional reinforcement of 3 officers and 130 troops, the British forces finally marched into and captured Owa. Through continuous torture of prisoners, the burial site of Crewe-Read was revealed on July 10th. His body was exhumed and sent to Benin City for a proper burial. In the final act of colonial retribution, the British authorities delivered a harsh blow to the leadership. The Obi of Owa, alongside several other prominent leaders, was arrested after being lured into a meeting in Warri. He and 15 of his chiefs were subsequently charged with Crewe-Read's murder and deported to unknown destinations, effectively decapitating the political and spiritual leadership of the Owa kingdom. Other chiefs who had not initially surrendered eventually did so on July 12. They were bundled up, including the defiant Ekumeku, tried and sentenced to death by hanging or severe prison terms in Asaba. The collaborating towns were heavily fined and guns were seized. This tragedy, however, brought the needed attention to the colonial injustices. The public outcry in Britain and the cause for peace led to the removal of the oppressive Benin appointees and a brief, temporary pause in the abuse of authority. Meanwhile, to the south, the Ukwuani people, known in colonial records as the Kwale district, were simultaneously waging their own war against oppression. Their uprising was directly linked to the broader Ekumeku movement that had fought the Royal Niger Company and the Southern Nigeria Regiment for years. By July 1903, the Ukwuanis of Amebu raided markets, driving out Itsekiri and Bini traders and issuing a clear threat: any white man or colonial official entering their country would be killed. News reached the colonial administration, and troops were drafted from Owerri, Asaba, and Old Calabar. They were to march on the Kwale district with instructions. The commanding officer was to remain at Amebu while the political officer communicated with the towns of Amutu, Omakwata, Ebedite, Ogium, and Amai, who, despite warnings, continued to engage in intertribal wars and closed the country to trade. Every town in the area was to be ordered to explain its continued resistance to the government. The town of Amai was to explain the reported killing of people that happened in its town some years back. The planned military invasion was postponed due to a nearby Ekumeku strike, but a fragile colonial presence was maintained. This peace was shattered on September 2, 1905. Assistant District Commissioner J. Davidson attempted to establish a native court in Ezionum, a small town about 3 miles from Amai, requesting names for the new colonial administrative structure. The people of Ezionum rejected this involvement completely. They seized and flogged the messenger before arming themselves and marching to nearby Amai, threatening to drive Davidson and all colonial officials out of the district. Davidson and his small patrol of 10 policemen were forced to escape to Sapele, reporting the news to the colonial government. A full-scale military operation was ordered. On October 11, 1905, 70 black soldiers and 3 white officers were sent out to halt the uprising in Ezionum and to display a show of force in Amai and Kokori in the Urhobo country. They met fierce, organized resistance. The fighting was so intense that the commanding officer, Captain Vassal, had to retreat to Sapele, nearly losing their only Maxim gun. Acting High Commissioner Forsberry, in his bid to help salvage the situation, dispatched Captain Haywood, 20 gunners, for Maxim guns and ample ammunition for small and larger arms alike. In addition to this, troops led by Lieutenant Colonel Morehouse also joined to crush the resistance. This large force and its sophisticated weapons were enough to crush the uprising completely. Guns were seized and towns were fined. The Kwale district went quiet, but only temporarily. 9 years later, the First World War provided the opportunity the Ukwuani people were waiting for. On October 17, 1914, a serious rising erupted in Abi and Owa, claiming the lives of 2 native court clerks, some court messengers and Yoruba traders. Crucially, the war effort forced the British imperial government to withdraw most of its troops from Nigeria. The natives saw this sudden military void, combined with the presence of previously banned German traders, as a green light to restore their traditional ways. Governor-General Sir Frederick Lugard had to act quickly. He ordered the closure of all German and Austrian firms, ordering them to relocate their businesses to Lagos. Frederick Lugard ordered investigations to be conducted to determine the root cause of the disturbances. He ordered 2 sections of infantry and 50 police officers, in addition to the police force available locally, to be sent to the places where the disturbances had happened to prevent the movement from spreading to other towns. He also ordered that a company of the Nigerian regiment should proceed at once from Calabar. The subsequent campaign was brutal. On October 25, 1914, Captain D. Wilson, the commanding officer of the Kwale Patrol, and Rakes, the commissioner of the Warri province, accompanied by troops and 1 Maxim gun, departed from Aragon and marched on to Abi. They were met by a large, spiked trench dug by the resistors. It was indeed an ambush as the colonial troops were attacked. After an hour of intense fighting, the colonial forces were able to go around the trench, flank the Abi men and occupied the town. Similar stubborn resistance was met at Owa and Utagba. Wilson captured Asissa, burning the Umu's quarter and taking the head chief captive. The price of defeat was staggering. Abi was fined 500 guns and £250 to guarantee good behavior for 3 years, ordered to construct a direct road to Owa, and to hand over its leaders. The terms of surrender for Owa were similar to those of Abi. The Emu towns of Umana, Obiogo, Abadeti, and Emu Bendo were collectively fined 250 guns and the sum of £280 as a guarantee for good behavior for 3 years and were ordered to construct a road along the Asa River to Igboku. By the end of November 1914, the Ukwuani resistance was entirely crushed. Although the acting lieutenant governor attempted to assure the natives of Britain's continued might, the veil was off. The withdrawals for World War I revealed the colonial government's vulnerability, leading to smaller, sporadic acts of resistance that persisted for years, a testament to the unending spirit of the Ekumeku. The Owa-Anglo War and the Ukwuani Uprisings were more than just footnotes in colonial history. They were fierce, organized declarations of sovereignty by the Ika and Ukwuani people. The Ekumeku movement, in all its forms, stands as a powerful reminder of Nigeria's complex journey to independence, a journey paved by the blood and sacrifice of men like the Obi of Owa-Ekut and the brave warriors of Ezionam. These were the violent winds of resistance, and their story deserves to be heard.
Thank you for joining me on this journey of African history, philosophy, and mythology. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe for more videos on African history, philosophy, and mythology.